Hey y'all, happy Sunday and welcome to this week's live Q&A session. This is the portion of the show where we allow YouTube to send out notifications that we're going live. If you're watching this live Q&A on replay, please scrub ahead until this graphic disappears and the actual show begins. If you're watching live and you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the live chat. But for now, grab a beverage, sit back, and relax while the countdown timer does its thing. Then we'll get started. Happy Sunday, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well. It's just another cloudy, rainy, miserable day in Southern Oregon, but hey, that's an Oregon winter for you. No big deal. This too shall pass. Oh man, today's kind of going to be kind of a hodgepodge. We've got a couple of questions here in the background, and if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll pick them up as we go along. Don't wait till the last minute though, because I miss them miss them easily. So before we get into any of that stuff at all, I first want to, like I do every week, give a shout out, say a hearty thank you to my friend Steve over at Harneal Media. You know, I have been singing his praises for years at this point, and that's going to continue until he tells me to shut up or knock it off, either or. But I can't say enough good about the guy. If you're even thinking about the idea of a website, a web store, where you can offer your products or services to the general public without paying commissions and without listing fees and all that other malarkey that gets in the way, because you know how it is. If it's free, you're the product, and they want their cut, you know, uh, making it not free. So I don't even know why I said that. But the point remains, with Steve, he's very, very competitively priced. It's a monthly maintenance fee, and that's about it. And everything you sell or any service you provide, all of the funds go to you. So do yourself a favor. Get over to harnealmedia.com, hit that contact us link, and shoot Steve a message. Let him know I sent you. Now, he is the sponsor of Mark Lindsay CNC.com, and he does it very well. I don't know how he gets away with doing everything that he does, because I don't think the man ever sleeps. And it's 100% personalized service. When you deal with Harneal Media, you're dealing with Steve, not some nameless, faceless person in a call center somewhere that you'll never be in contact with again. So again, do yourself a favor. There's a link to Harneal Media down in the description of this live stream and every other video and live stream on this channel. That's that way for a reason. Check it out. Do yourself a favor. And thank you, Steve, for everything that you do. I truly appreciate it. So, oh, there we go. Ray Russell says we just signed up with Steve. Welcome to the family, my friend. Welcome to the family. Yeah, I'm here to tell you. He does it. Yeah, Butch says, cheer up. It could be snowing. Yeah, I did that a few weeks back, but in typical Oregon fashion, it melted off like in, I want to say 2 days. We had 5.5 inches one night, and it was bare like 2 days later. And that's, par for the course. But that's okay. All right, we have a few questions here in the background, and I wanted to get to those, get moving. Kurt over at Crafty Jans LLC says, can you explain the difference on the profile toolpath allowance entries? There are two places to enter a number. Yes, and this is pretty straightforward. I have here in V-carve Pro, I have two vectors, and I've got a closed vector here and an open vector down here. And if we shoot over to the Toolpaths tab, I've created a profile toolpath for each one. And I have one selected here, profile number one, and that's for this closed toolpath. So let's go on ahead and look, and we'll take a peek at what's going on here. He's asking about the allowances and the two places you can enter an allowance. One is right here where it's talking about machining the vectors. Now for this vector, I'm going to cut to the outside. And you'll see I've selected the outside / right. This causes a little bit of confusion as well. So let me digress just a little bit here. Here on the on a closed vector, it's going to go by the outside or the inside. On the open vector, it's going to go by the right or the left. What's meant by that? Well, again, let me close this real quick. If we select a vector and we go into node editing mode just by tapping the letter N on my keyboard, we can see we have a green point and 3 black points. The green point is always the start point, whether it's an open vector or a closed vector. If I select this open vector, again, I have a green start point. You'll notice the arrow along this span right here. There's an arrow. And that's pointing which direction this vector was drawn in and which direction the vector goes. If you remember from one of my earliest videos, a vector has to have a start point and an end point. The green is identifying the start point. Now back up here to the closed vector. On a closed vector, the start point and the end point are the same point. So we can also see we have an arrow going in this direction. Now on a closed vector, let me come out of node editing and we'll go back into this toolpath. On a closed vector, we're going to cut to the outside in this case. I could just as easily cut to the inside, but in this case, I want to cut to the outside. Right and left don't enter into it until you're talking about an open vector. But let's concentrate on this one, this closed vector first. We're cutting to the outside. Now down here is the first blank where we can enter an allowance offset. Before I even touch this, I'm going to calculate this toolpath with no allowance offset at all. And we're going to take a look at where that's actually going to cut. And the way we do that is we go into the 2D view. Now, oops, that's what I meant to do. Now here in the 2D view, we can see that we've got a check mark in this box over here. If the toolpath is highlighted, like this one is, we can see that gray box around it. That is selected. The check mark means it's visible. And that does make a difference. For instance, up here, we can preview the selected toolpath. So if I put a check, if I click this, it's going to preview this toolpath because it's selected. If I uncheck this and check this one, I can preview the visible, and it's going to preview this one, even though this one is selected. There's a difference between visible and selected, is my point. Now, neither toolpath is visible, but this one is selected. It does make a difference. It also makes a difference when you go to save G-code. Now, what we want is we want the toolpath visible. So we'll put a check mark in the box here. Now we have two ways of showing this toolpath, where it is and where it's going to go. And we can toggle that by coming up to this icon right here in the 2D view. Toggle the toolpath 2D view drawing style, wireframe or solid. This is a wireframe. It's drawing that toolpath as a wireframe. Now, if I come up and I click on that icon, it switches over to a solid view. This is showing you exactly where that tool is going to cut. And with no allowance offset, it's cutting right along this vector. It's also leaving square corners because I have that selected in the toolpath. But you can see exactly where that tool is going to cut. Now, if I double click and go back into this toolpath and we enter, I'm going to enter a big allowance offset so it's real easy to see. We'll say 0.1 and it's a positive number. We're cutting to the outside. So when I calculate this toolpath, it's going to send me back into the 3D view and it's going to make that toolpath visible. When I go back into the 2D view, you can see where this toolpath is cutting out here. So a positive number makes it cut further to the outside because, again, it's a closed vector and I selected we're cutting to the outside of the vector. If I go back in here and I make it a negative number, it's now going to cut to the inside of that vector by that negative 0.1. Go back into the 2D view, and there we go. Also notice when I cut to the outside of the vector, it didn't make sharp corners. When I cut to the inside of the vector, it did make sharp corners. So, when would you use this? You would use this as a way to leave a little bit of an allowance. For instance, if you had a 1/4-inch hole and a 1/4-inch dowel, you know that a 1/4-inch anything is not going to fit into a 1/4-inch hole because they're the same size. So you could cut a 1/4-inch hole with a slight negative offset, or excuse me, a slight positive offset. Okay. Making it just slightly larger than a 1/4 of an inch. So you could make it 0.253. So 3/1000ths larger to allow that 1/4-inch dowel to slip into that 1/4-inch hole. Or if that was too sloppy, you could put in a negative offset of, say, 0.03. And it would cut it slightly undersize. So this is a way to adjust how big this is going to be without having to come back in here and redraw everything to the proper sizes. So, someone explained to me a negative allowance will cross the vector. It depends on if it's an open or closed vector. On a closed vector, a negative one will cut to the inside, just slightly undersize. Okay. AL says, I wonder what happens with extremely large allowance values, like a whole inch, for example. Well, in this case, let's go take a look. Let's see what'll happen. I'll go in here and I'll try one in the negative and we'll see what happens. Calculate, 2D view, and that's what it's going to cut. Now, personally, I would just redraw the vector if that's the case. I don't even know that I would go 0.1. I would just go a few thousandths of an inch or a few tenths of a millimeter, you know. So I don't know that that would be really worthwhile. And if I went to the positive and calculated, obviously it's going to cut an inch out. And again, here I would just redraw the vector. So that's on a closed vector. And again, you access that by putting a check mark in the box here to make your toolpath visible. And then you use this last icon over here. It's going to, by default, open as a wireframe, which is this straight line with all the arrows. You click it, and it'll switch over to solid. And this way you can see exactly where that bit is going to cut and how much space you'll have, how much room you'll have. So now it's a little bit different when we get into or open vectors, excuse me. So we'll go into this toolpath here. And again, I have no allowance offset, but I've clicked to the outside right. When you're dealing with an open vector, now we're talking right and left. We're not talking inside and outside. This isn't closed. There is no inside or outside. You're either going to the right or to the left. The right or left of what? Well, this is a tip I try to share with folks when you're first getting started. We'll go back into node editing here a minute. Tap the letter N on my keyboard. And again, this comes to this start point and this arrow. To figure out whether you need a negative or positive offset, or if you want to cut to the inside or to the outside. Imagine standing on this point and looking in the direction of the arrow. Negative is going to go this way. Positive, excuse me, I got that wrong. Positive is going to go this way. Negative is going to go this way. How do I know that? Because we're dealing with an open vector. If I go to the outside right, it's going to go here. A positive offset is going to make it move further to the right. If I go here, it's going to cut to the left of this vector. A positive offset is going to make it go further to the left. A negative offset is going to bring it back over this direction. Let's make sure that I'm correct here. I've got it set to the inside to the left, and I've just added a positive allowance offset. So it should go further over this way, 0.1. Let's see. And we'll calculate it. Then we'll come over here to the 2D view, and we'll go into solid. And it did. It moved it further to the left with a positive offset. Wouldn't that depend also if you're doing climb or conventional? Yes. And I'm glad you brought that up, because conventional cut, you see this little diagram here. A conventional cut, this is your start point. It's going to go this direction. If you do a climb cut, it's going to go the opposite direction. So even though your start point is here, it's going to start over here because you're cutting climb. Now, on a profile like this, I tend to not use climb or conventional. I tend to cut conventional all the time, simply because when you're making a cut like this, you're cutting climb and conventional at the same time. This is going to be cutting conventional. This edge is going to be cutting climb. So if this is the surface that is important, I would go conventional. If this is the surface that's important, I would go climb. Now, John just asked, is the blue cut path the exact same size as the bit used? And if so, could you use that to check clearance between parts? Exactly, yes. The blue cut path is the same size as the bit you have selected, and you can use that to check clearance between parts. In fact, I do that a lot. I use that to see how much clearance I have between parts to see should I put tabs here or not. So I might put a tab over here on this vector and then put a tab over here on this vector. That way I'm not just cutting through one tab to make another. So if I select I didn't realize I was using a point cutting radius bit, that made that blue line width this width here, the diameter, 0.53 inches. Wow. Let's go with an 1/8 inch end mill. Select. And now let's calculate it. Calculate 2D view, and you see that blue is a lot narrower. But it's showing you the width of where the cutting diameter of that bit, where it's going to cut. Now, if I come back in here and I just change this to a negative number, I'm still cutting to the outside, but now I put in a negative 0.1 offset. It's going to come back to the left. Or excuse me, to the right. I was in the Army 9 years. I should know my left from my right. And it created sharp corners. So if you're cutting to the outside, obviously it's going to be a little bit different with a negative allowance offset. It's going to bump over this way 0.1, which is almost the diameter of that 8 inch bit. So where I'm going with this is this allowance sets where this is going to cut actually on the when it goes to cut the vector. If you click on the vector, allowance offset is grayed out. You can't enter an offset. It's going to cut on that vector, no matter what you have in here. It's grayed out. I can't change it. I can't eliminate it. So we calculate the tool path, come over here to the 2D view, and which did I calculated the wrong tool path. If I go on the vector and calculate 2D view, it's cutting, putting the center of that bit on the vector. You can't do an allowance when you're cutting on the vector. Okay. So now the other place there is an allowance that can be added is when you're doing a separate last pass. Now I'm going to select a 1/4 inch end mill for this. Select, and I'm going to cut all the way through the material. Z equals. That'll give me more pass. Well, let me go ahead and edit my passes. I'm going to make so we can see them. Edit passes. Okay. Now we have do a machine to the outside, and I'm going to take that allowance offset out so I don't confuse. We're going to do a separate last pass, and I'm going to set an allowance of 10 thousandths of an inch. Now, let me stop for a second here. A separate last pass will allow you, okay, let's try to figure out the easiest way to put this. There's no other way to put this than to just do one and show you. I'm doing a separate last pass with an allowance of 0.01. That's 10 thousandths of an inch. Okay. In fact, I'm going to make it bigger. I'm going to go ahead and make it 0.1 just so it's easier for you to see. Now, you do not have to do a separate last pass. I almost always do. We'll calculate it. Yeah, I know that's a large. We'll do it anyway. Now, if we look at this, we can see that we have one pass here that's inset. It's way, way inside of this of these other tool paths. And we can see we have two wireframes here. Now I can put it on solid, but we can't tell what's going on. So I'm going to leave it in the wireframe, but I'm going to jump back over to the 3D view because that gives me a good look at what's happening here. What we're doing when we do a separate last pass with that allowance, it's going to take 6 passes. The first 5 are going to cut way outside this point 1, cutting it larger than it needs to be. So these first 5 passes are going to be cut big. They're going to be cut oversized. That point 1 outside. Then that last pass is the, lift it up here. Here we go. It's going to get around to this 5th pass and retract all the way out of the material. Move in, you can see it right here. Move in, then plunge down and make that last cut to the actual size of the vector. Now, overall, in general, if you've ever taken a look at the edge after you've cut something out with a profile toolpath, you can sometimes see a little divot on the edge, and then you see little tracks all the way around as the bit has cut each depth in each one of these passes. Doing a separate last pass with a much smaller allowance, I almost always use 0.01, no matter what diameter of bit I'm using. And I've done this on all of my CNCs, from my first plywood CNC up to the Gatton CNC, now to the Avid. It will make one pass, cutting the full thickness of the material all at once, but that it's only trimming 10 thousandths of an inch off of that full depth in one pass. It will remove all of those little witness marks and all of those little ramps if you use ramps and what have you. But I almost always use an allowance of 10 thousandths of an inch. Now, Kurt has a follow-up here. Is it a good rule of thumb for the last pass allowance to be based on the bit used? For the most part, yes. But only if you're talking about a real tiny bit. But you also have to pay attention to the flute length, the cutting flute length of the bit you're using. For instance, I have 3/4 inch material here, and none of my 1/8 inch bits have a flute length that will cut 3/4 inch material. They're all just shy of that, about 5/8, maybe a little bit more, maybe 11/16. I don't have an 1/8 inch bit that has 1 inch flute length that will cut through 3/4 inch material all at once. So by trimming off, and you'd be amazed at how little 10 thousandths of an inch is. By trimming off just that little skin, you remove all of those witness marks, and you remove all of those little ramps and all that other good stuff, and you're taking it easy on the bit as well. But you do have to pay attention to the flute length of the bit. And if you're doing an outside cut and you're saving, this is the part you want to save, you're cutting this out of a piece of material, I would just go ahead and jump up to a larger bit so you have that flute length. I think just about every 1/4 inch end mill I have has a 1-inch flute length, so this is not an issue. So Gary Meyer says it could be called a finish pass. It could be called a finish pass, but here within the software, it's a separate last pass. So we change that to 0.01 and we calculate that, and now we can see that it's a much smaller. I mean, you really have to zip in here to see how much that's actually taking off. So now I very seldom use a separate last pass if I'm not cutting all the way through the material. So, and also this allowance here has nothing to do with this allowance. This allowance is where the bit is actually going to cut on the material all the way around. This only affects a separate last pass. They will work together. I'm assuming this is an addition to the initial allowance. Yes, if you have an allowance entered up here, it will calculate with this. You can use them together. So it's that's one of those if you prefer type of a things. I very seldom use a separate last pass. In fact, I don't think I have ever used a separate last pass when I wasn't cutting all the way through the material. So, but that doesn't mean that I won't. It also doesn't mean that it can't be done. You certainly can. It's just that I haven't really seen the need to, because if I'm using a profile, say, to drill a hole, it's usually because something is going to go in that hole. So, okay, let me go ahead and close this up. So I don't know if that helps you out, Kurt, or not, but there it is. So let's pull that down and let's go over here and see what I missed in the chat. AL says, basically all those things take into consideration where is the important part of the stock, and a positive allowance will leave more of it while a negative value will run into it. Exactly. Exactly. That's much more eloquent way of putting what I said. Yes. Yep. Okay. Let's see here. All right, let's get to the next question. Let's see here. Brooks Martin wants to know, is it possible to rotate a two-sided composite model with data on both sides in the X and Y or Z axis where both sides move together? No, this is not that type of software. This is Aspire is for bas relief. It is not NURBS based. It doesn't use triangulation or any of that. It doesn't model in 3D space. It's bas relief software. And it uses, to achieve that, it uses bitmaps. Now, if you have, say, a 6-sided object, the Vectric demonstration videos likes I misspoke. It doesn't use NURBS is what I meant to say. Like Rhino does. Rhino and RhinoCam. The Vectric import video likes to use that model of a Porsche. And they import it as a two-sided object when actually, if you want to get technical, it is a six-sided object because you have both sides, but you also have the top and bottom and the front and rear. Now, they did update the software, the tutorial rather, so that you could import the model with the orientation from the side and do a double-sided project, import that in, double-sided. So you get the left side and the right side. But in the software, it'll appear to be the top and the bottom. But then you can start a new sheet. And you can import that model looking at change the orientation so you've got the top and bottom. Then you can start another new sheet, double-sided again, and orient the model so that you've got the front and rear. So no, you can't turn the model like you could in something like Rhino or Fusion or even SketchUp. But you can fake it to where you've got three separate projects where they're all double-sided, where you can get the left side, right side, top, bottom, then front and rear. And I believe they talk about that either in it was either that 3D import video or it was one of their live streams where they talked about it. I'll have to go find it. But I would start with Vectric's model import video and work through that. Now, Vectric also has playlists. So I would get into their playlists and see if they kind of like Orbit. Yes, kind of like Orbit, exactly. So I would get into their tutorials and I would look up to see where that was. And if I can find it, I'll put a link to it down in the description. So, Dwayne Ruthig says, I do that with parts that I cut. The key there is locating the extra sides before the cuts. Yes, absolutely. You do have to line them up. And Dwayne, if you've seen some of the stuff Dwayne has made, oh my God, has he got this down? So, in fact, I might ask you to do a presentation over on the members only side, Dwayne. We'll talk about that behind the scenes. We'll talk about that behind the scenes because I know there are a lot of people who want to know about that. Now, AL wanted to know what are NURBS. Non-uniform rational B-splines. It's a CAD tool used to represent curves and surfaces. Something like Rhino creates a mesh, okay? And then you apply a surface to that mesh. And that's what creates the model, is that surface. NURBS are, imagine points along that mesh, every intersection where the mesh crosses, there's a point there that can be manipulated, brought down or brought up. That's what NURBS are. Okay. It's a whole different way of modeling. Again, Aspire is bitmap or pixel based, and that's for bas relief type models. something like Rhino, and I see here John Thumb saying all these unknown terms, herbs, orbit, rhino. Rhinoceros is it's a 3D modeling software. Okay. Um, 8 centers, the NURBS based on a radial measurement from a center point. It would be better to do your own research. I am not an expert in it. I tried using Rhino before I ended up with Aspire. I tried a trial version of Rhino, and the learning curve is easier than it's easier than Fusion, but it's also closer to AutoCAD in that, yes, you have icons that you can click to do something, but you also have command line. So that if you know what you want to do, you can type in the command and it will do that on the screen, but it is 3D modeling software. You're creating meshes for surfaces, then you apply the surface to that mesh and that creates the model. Rhinoceros is pretty popular. It's very, very powerful. But Rhinoceros is the CAD side of CAD, of the CAD CAM equation. You can also get a plugin for it called Rhino Cam. But Rhino itself, last time I looked, and this has been several years back, Rhino itself was about $600. And Rhino Cam was an additional $600. So by the time you had all that together, and again, this was Rhino version 5. I think they're up to version 7 now. But these are, I had no idea Rhino could write G-code at all. By itself, it can't. You add that Rhino Cam plugin and it will. So Rhinoceros itself is a 3D modeling software, and it's used by Rhino is used by 3D modelers for video games, although not much. They've moved on to other things for that, but there are some people that still use it for 3D set direction and things like that. Not so much for characters. Some of them do, some of them don't. Rhino's been around for a long time. But it's pretty pricey, and it does have a steep learning curve. But for the type of 3D modeling I do, I kind of stepped away from Rhino and got brave and got Aspire. So I need to turn my heater off. I'm sorry. It's getting close to sweat time here. 76 degrees in the shop. So Rhino is on version 8 and is $9.95. Yeah. So again, I looked into it several years back and everything has changed, I'm sure. But Rhino Cam is a separate plugin for Rhino. And I never learned Rhino Cam. So John, let me tell you, don't get discouraged by all this, okay? You can, believe me, you can drive yourself crazy with terms and different rabbit holes to go through. You can literally go the next 20 years and never, ever hear the word NURBS again, unless you get into the other type of 3D modeling. If you're making components for assemblies, like if you're making gears to put into a machine and you want to make the gears and the bearings and the pins and all this and see how they interact and how they interplay, Aspire may not be the software for you. That's more for assemblies. Aspire it can do that, but it's not made for it. It's kind of like, yeah, you can haul firewood in a Cadillac, but it wasn't made for it, you know? So you don't have to worry about any of that stuff in Aspire if you're not doing that kind of 3D modeling. If you're wanting to make a beach scene with palm trees, you can do that with Aspire. I've heard from a couple people, it's not super easy. You can do it, but it's not super easy to V-carve with Fusion 360. You can do it. It's just you got to kind of rethink some things. So this software, this type of software, CAD/CAM software, is used in all kinds of different industries. So I know a fella who lives up in Washington. Hi, if you're watching, Bart. He works for Boeing, and they have a big thermwood printer and CNC. It's as close to 6-axis as you're going to get. CNC router with an industrial 3D printer, and they print up huge wing sections. It has this gigantic hopper that they dump ABS pellets into, and these pellets are about the size of your thumb, and it will print. If you go to Thermwood's YouTube or their homepage, they show one printing a mold to make a 16-foot fiberglass boat. It 3D prints the boat's hull. Then the CNC comes in and does all the fine machining. It is huge. A 16-foot boat in one piece. And they do an inside mold and an outside mold, then they go do what they do. It's nuts. You can use all kinds of different software. They're probably using something proprietary. I don't know what Thermwood runs, but it's all the same technology. There are multi-million-dollar corporations out there that are using Vectric software. It just depends on what you're making. It just depends on what you're making. So, okay, let's get into some more questions. I don't know if that helped or not, Brooks. We can get further into the 3D thing when we. I'm going to be doing a little bit of 3D tomorrow on the members only side. So we can get further into it then. Let's see, what are we at right here? About not quite an hour. Okay, Alan Williamson wants to know, is there a way of saving multiple work position start points? Okay, are you talking about within the Vectric software, or are you talking about in your controller outside on the machine? If you're talking about within the Vectric software, about the only way you can do that is by using sheets. And let me bring this in and I'll show you what I mean here. Let's go to full screen on this. And we'll go back over to the design side. And I have this sheet. And my XYZ position is down here on my lower left. We'll go into the job setup, and we can see here my XY datum position is the bottom left, and my Z0 position is on the material surface. Okay, so I've got that. Now, if I create a new sheet, and I'll do that by going into my Sheets tab, I'll add a new sheet, and I'll just call it Sheet 2, and tap Enter to accept that name. Now, it doesn't matter if I'm in that sheet or not out here on the board, on the drawing area. There's there's sheet 2 right there. I have to have it selected here. So highlighted in blue, whoops. And then come down here and I can click edit. And that's going to take me to job setup for this sheet. Okay. And here I can change the size. So we'll make this one 16 by 14. And I can change the Z0 position to the machine bed. And I can change the XY data position to the center. And click OK. And now this sheet only, I have an XY data position in the center. When I go back over to sheet 1, the XY datum position is over here on the bottom left. Okay. So with sheets, you can do it. Now, it's also possible, let me go back in here and we'll edit sheet 2 again. I want to bring it back to the same size, 12 by 12. I'm going to go ahead and leave this the way it is. Click OK. All right. Now, when you would do this, I don't know, but you may find an application for it. I'm going to go back over here into sheet 1 by double clicking. I'm going to select that vector. Then I'm going to right click it. I'm going to copy to sheet 2. So now I have that vector in both places. I'm going to come back over to sheet 2. And I could do whatever I want with this. I could do a pocket here with a allowance offset, and allowance offset in a pocket is the same as in the profile. Okay. I could do a pocket in here and then come back over here to sheet 1. And this is my profile. I'm going to do a positive offset to cut 0.1 outside. But back over here, I'm going to do a negative offset to cut further in. So it leaves a 1/4 inch wall. So I can do a negative offset of 1/8 of an inch and a positive offset of 1/8 of an inch. And I have a 1/4 inch thick wall. Does that make sense? John Thumb is asking, what's the difference between sheets and layers? Think of sheets as pieces of material. They're different pieces of material, so they can have different setups. So sheets were introduced so that you could put an entire project in one file. So I have one V-carve file, but I can have multiple parts. One of the videos, and I'm going to write myself a note here. One of the videos, the first video that I used sheets in, it was I made a little walnut shelf for my wife, for her teacups and things like that. I used, I want to say 5 sheets because I had a left side, a right side, 2 little decorative trims that went on shelves that I didn't cut out on the CNC. And then the back of the shelf had a sculpted top. So I was able to create 5 sheets of 5 different pieces of material. And but it only took one file. I didn't have to have a separate file for the back, the left side, the right side, and each of those 2 decorative trim pieces that I cut. And the back. I could do it all in one file. That's a sheet. A layer is when you have multiple vectors on each sheet. In something simple like this, where I have this open vector and this closed vector, and they don't interfere or interact with each other, I don't necessarily need layers. But if I were doing something else, like putting a star right in the center, and it did interfere with those vectors. Let me align that horizontally, and it does interfere with these vectors. When I get in here, I might cut something and I didn't mean to cut it. So what I'll do is I'll move this to a new layer, layer 2, and I'm going to change the color of this layer to red. Okay. Now when I deselect, this is on its own layer. It's all on the same sheet, but if I go up here, I can see I've got a second layer, and it's red. You notice that layer 2 is in bold. That means it's selected. Well, so anything I do out here now is going to be added to layer 2. If I draw a hole over here, it's going to be on layer 2. I better want it there. If I don't want it there, I can just click the title of layer 1, and then it's going to be drawn on layer 1. If I want to make a third layer, I can add a new layer here, and I can click this little box with the arrow on it, and I can make this one blue and click off. And now I can put a hole right there and a hole right there and a hole right here. And even though they don't interfere with one another, I've kept them on separate layers so that they can be organized. Okay. Now, Jeffrey Abbott, I was trying to remember how to do that. If you hold down Control while pressing Calculate, it'll calculate without sending you into the 3D view. Very helpful tweaking things. I knew there was a way to do that. I couldn't remember what it was. Thank you, Jeffrey. What he means is if I go over here, Profile Toolpath, I'm going to turn off Do a Separate Last Pass. And I'm going to hold down Control and click Calculate, and it doesn't automatically jump into the 3D view. I can see where that toolpath is going to cut. Thank you, Jeff. I knew that there was a way of doing it, but it has been recalculated. So, all right. Let's see here. Do layers stay with sheets? Not yet. Not yet. That's coming in 12. That's coming in 12.5. But you didn't hear that from me. Let's see here. Let's see. Hey, Mark, how do you like version 12.013? Is it worth the 287? Does it make inlays simple? I have not done an inlay. I will be this year. In fact, I'm playing around. No, you can't see it from here. Well, yeah, you can see it from here. Right back there, there's a piece of MDF laying against a wall. I'm doing some testing right now. Not quite ready to do a video yet. The V-inlay toolpath does help, but it isn't perfect. There are some restrictions. Wait for 12.5. That's all I can say on that. Things are improving. They are, from what I understand, we're looking at sometime this spring, 12.5 will be released. Now, that's not to say don't upgrade to 12.5. or don't upgrade to 12.0 because 12.5 is coming out. If you have version 12.0, you're going to get a free upgrade to 12.5. That's called an in-family upgrade, okay? When? Your guess is as good as mine. They hold that information pretty tight to their chest, okay? Um, if you start seeing videos, whether you're on Facebook, Instagram, or their YouTube channel, if you start seeing uh, YouTube shorts from them or Facebook reels showing off what's coming soon, you know they're about 2 weeks away from releasing. But they don't. I am a beta tester, but they don't tell us when it's coming. They keep that information. They keep that information pretty tight to their chest. I should get 12.5. Then my license is round about a year old last month or this month. Yeah, if you have 12.0 now, you will get 12.5. You can do it now. You can wait until later. It's entirely up to you. If you have 12.0 now, you will get 12.5. So, and it'll be free. Let's see here. Uh, is it worth it? Rob, in the interest of transparency, I have both. I have both V-carve and Aspire. Because I'm a beta tester, I have to be able to test in both. Okay, so I have a license for both. Is it worth it? I say yes, it is. Simply because so many things have been made easier. So many things. There are too many differences to count, as a matter of fact. Um, all of these icons that I'm showing you up here, like how to go into the 3D view and turn on. Well, first of all, vectors showing in the 3D view, that's 12.0. You can turn them off or you can turn them on. You can move and edit vectors in the 3D view. You know, decrease a radius or increase a radius. Um, there are all kinds of things that you can do with vectors in the 3D view now that you can't do in the older versions. Um, there you go. Martin Pearson has the answer. Download the trial version of 12.0, play around with it, and see if you think it's worth it to you. My personal opinion, I think so. I really do. I think it is. I was skeptical at first. For instance, I was talking about sheets a couple of minutes ago. When they first came out with that, I thought, okay, yeah, that's cool for people that need it, but when would I ever use it? The very first project I made was that walnut shelf, and I needed it. I used it. And now, I mean, I wish I had it all the time. You know, let's see. Is there an app permanent offset that can be applied to center an add-on laser attachment? Um, do that in your controller software. Do that in your you would do that in your controller software. Vectric. Now uh, I don't have the laser module. I don't have a laser. Okay. And before you invest in the laser module, go to Vectric website and look at the laser module. There's a list of lasers that it supports. It doesn't support every laser out there, and it only supports lasers that are attached to CNC routers. It doesn't support a separate laser, its own machine. Um, how do you get to be a beta tester? They invited me. I don't know why, but I'm very, very grateful. So, All right. John Thumb has another question. Can you help me with toolpaths and bit type settings of engraving a photo V-carve? I have it imported, but it doesn't look very clear. Um, I hesitate to say anything. I'm experimenting with that now. Okay. Um, I haven't cut it yet. It's still within the software, but I haven't actually cut it yet. Um, uh, anyhow, um, I saw that, Michael. Uh, um, basically put from everything I have seen, and we're talking about the photo V-carve toolpath. Um, it depends on the bit you use. Obviously, a V bit. Okay, we're talking about. There's so many variables. First of all, how big is the actual project? If it's huge, then a 90 or 60 degree V bit may work just fine. If it's pretty small, you may want to go with a very shallow carving depth and use a steeper angled bit, maybe going to 30 degree or even 15 degree. Um, I'm going to get into this during the video, but you then have to wonder: are you going to do a raster type of a raster type of a engraving? Meaning, let me bring this in real quick. Um, again, I would use a with a shallower tool path on a smaller one. I would probably go for a hatch strategy. On something that's big, I would probably go with a raster, meaning it's just going to go in one direction. Now, and then you set your angle. 0 degrees is side to side. 45 degrees to the positive would be starting at the bottom corner and going up like in this. A negative 45, it would go the opposite direction. And if you used a hatch strategy, it would do both. You see, um, from everything I have heard, photo V carves don't really look very good at all until you get some stain on them. Then the whole character changes because you're not getting that contrast of light versus dark. You know, um, I'll get further into it when I do the video, but I am getting into uh, doing a photo V-carve. I've been wanting to do a photo V-carve for a couple of years now. Well, who am I kidding? About 8 or 9 years now, and I'm finally going to do it this year. Okay, so I'm guessing you need pretty tight grain for photo V-carves. I know someone back in Georgia. She uses almost exclusively uh, either the plainest flat sawn maple she can find or flat sawn basswood. Now, over in Europe, I believe you guys call that lime. They're they're almost identical trees. But like, for instance, in the UK, you call it a lime tree. Over here, it's basswood. They're the same, they're just different variants of the same species of tree. Okay. It is a pretty bland looking wood,
but it carves beautifully, and the grain doesn't get in. The grain doesn't interfere because you don't want like stripes or bird's eyes on somebody's face where it looks like they have acne. So lindenwood in Europe. Okay, I've heard it called lime by a few people. And I went through because I wanted to find out what the difference was. Martin Pearson, who was just commenting a few minutes ago, he's in Scotland, and we were talking about basswood. And so I looked up what the lime tree was because I was still thinking citrus. And I looked up the lime tree and I said, wait a minute, that's basswood. And I went over and I looked at basswood, what its genus was. And let me look. The basswood is Tilia americana, and the lime tree is Tilia europa. They're different variations. Now you've just thrown lindenwood in it. Let's look it up. Lindenwood. It's also known as basswood or lime. It's known as linden or lime for the European species, basswood for the North American species. Okay, so there we go. but basically, Martin says I got my info from the wood database. Same here. But it's just two different variations of the same tree, but they're just about identical. And I guess the carving characteristics are identical. And but from what I gather, it's the fact that it is well, here Jim Brown, the least grain, the better it looks. Yeah, you don't have a bunch of grain in there to affect the whatever you're carving. So not only that, from everything I gather, it carves so nice. I know hand carvers love it. And Mike Bernasconi could expand on that. So, Eight Center's asking, does it laser well? Do you know? Martin could answer that. I don't have a laser. And I know Martin's out there. He just answered. From everything I've seen Martin do, I would say it lasers pretty well. Yeah, definitely don't try to use ash. Ash is an open wood. Oh man, you're really testing me now. I don't even know what that is. Let me look at that. That's MUKU. I got to look this up. You're making me Google in the middle of a live stream, but that's okay. I'm just enough of a wood nerd. UNGU. LUNGU. It is a very durable to fungi and is durable to dry wood borers. It's an exotic African timber for hydraulic works. Large tree of the forest of West and Central Africa that can reach 50 meters high, 2 meters in diameter. There's nothing like that here that I have ever worked with. It's not even, I don't even see it in the wood database, or at least that's not coming up. I'll have to look for it a little bit later on. But so John Thompson says Studio Z has a great tutorial on photo V-carve. Okay. So, all right. John Thumb says there was a project, Late Side Bear Clock, on Vectric, but it says it's for Aspire. Does that mean it won't work on V-carve Pro? Probably. You'll want to look to see now is this on the Vectric YouTube channel, or is it in your Vectric portal? So I know where to look. But I believe if it says for Aspire, means it won't work in V-carve. And in fact, there's I'm going to go over this a little bit more tomorrow night on the members only side, channel members, but here's a little preview of one of the things because I have been asked about it. This is V-carve Pro. Let me open up a session of Aspire and I'll see what I can do here. All right, create a new file real quick. And I'll throw, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. I'll throw a piece of 3D clip art in here real quick. I'll do my default Wally Gator because Wally Gator is cool. Put one right out there in the open. All right, he's right in the middle. Now we'll go back over to the design tab. And if I go to save this, save as, I can save this. It's right now it's saving as an Aspire file, CRV3D. That cannot be opened by V-carve Pro or V-carve Desktop or Cut 2D. Can't do it. I can click this drop-down menu and I can save it as a CRV file. But watch what happens if I do. So I'll name it Wally. If you know, you know. And go to save. Any features in this document incompatible with V-carve Pro will be removed from the file you are about to save. Do you wish to continue? No, meaning this 3D model is not available to V-carve Pro. Any toolpath I calculate and the model itself will be removed before it's saved as a CRV file. So if you have Aspire, you can't save files for your V-carve buddies. It'll take all of the 3D content out. Even if that 3D content is available in V-carve Pro. Because Aspire works differently. V-carve is not 3D modeling software. You can carve a 3D model, but you cannot create or edit a 3D model in V-carve. The only thing you can do, let me close that. Nope, don't want to save it. The only thing you can do with a 3D model in V-carve involves these tools down here. You can resize, you can slice it, you can create a cross section from it, draw a vector boundary around it, you can smooth selected components, you can scale your Z height, and you can add a zero plane. That's all. So V-carve is not 3D modeling software. So let me cruise up the road here and see, did I miss a question? I don't think I did. I don't think I... Nope, I don't think I did. All right. So would it change the Gator to 2D? No, it would not. It would not change it to 2D. It would just completely remove it. It will remove all of the 3D content and any 3D toolpaths you've calculated. So they do that to avoid the situation where one guy in the makerspace has Aspire and he's making 3D models for all of his buddies for however much. Now, he could export them as STLs, but that's a different subject. You can only import one STL into V-carve, and I don't know why I'm still sharing my screen. So, okay, programming note. Today is the 23rd of February. There will not be a Sunday live Q&A next week. My wife has a bagpiping competition down in Redding, California, and it's our anniversary weekend, so we're going to be out of town. All right. So there will not be a Sunday live stream. There will be a members only live stream on Monday, the 3rd, I believe that is. Monday the 3rd, there will be a members only live stream. And the topic for that hasn't been decided yet. We'll decide that tomorrow. Speaking of which, bagpipe live stream, she has said, oh no, no way. She has said no way. But if you're in the Redding, California area, it's at the Red Lion in Redding. Members, tomorrow we're going to get into composite models. Kurt had a few questions, and there's the final word from the authority. Not a chance. There's the bagpiper of the family. Not a chance. We're going to get into composite 3D modeling, and we're going to be doing a few things that are a little bit different. I'll explain more tomorrow anyway. 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. Remember to hit the community/membership tab. Some people see community tab and some people see membership tab. Click that. And you'll find the links to the members only live stream. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, or you want to be included in this exclusive club, then click on the little word join down there below this video panel. Another panel will pop up and a video will play and tell you all about channel membership. We have a great group of folks, the super secret Facebook group and the super secret live chat, and it gets pretty busy. We have a lot of fun. As far as next week is concerned, again, there will not be a Sunday live Q&A. It'll be the first one I've missed in a couple years. Yeah, that's it. That's all. Thank you for spending part of your Sunday with me. I really appreciate it. You folks are the reason I do all this. This is fun for me, and you make it so. So please keep it up. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to put them in the comment section. Give me a thumbs up if you got anything out of this live stream. And if you've got a request for something you want to see, put it in the comments. That's where I get my ideas from. So thank you very much for spending part of your Sunday with me. And until week after next, y'all take care. Go do something cool. Go make some chips or kick back and have some chips. Choice is yours. Y'all take care.